Hi, and welcome to Vanished Stories. Before tonight's story begins, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. The mountains are indifferent gods. They care not for your ambitions, the worried faces of loved ones at home, or the casual promise you made to be back by Sunday. In the unforgiving vastness of 2011, 36-year-old Rebecca Hale learned this brutal truth, swallowed whole by Utah's Devil's Ridge Trail. This was no ordinary path, but a serpentine trap of red rock canyons where the earth itself seemed to conspire, disorienting even the most seasoned wanderers. Rebecca vanished without a trace, a ghost absorbed by the rugged landscape. But here, the tragedy takes a darker turn. Here lies the detail that still sends shivers down the spines of hardened search and rescue veterans, transforming a simple disappearance into something far more sinister. 5 agonizing years later, when Rebecca's remains were finally discovered, there was a note, pinned defiantly to her chest. 4 chilling words that shattered every assumption. You stopped looking soon. This was no desperate plea for help, no final farewell of a soul at its breaking point. This was a message, cold and deliberate, from someone who reveled in their orchestration, a calculated whisper designed to ensure the world knew this was intentional. A predator who found perverse pleasure in watching a community tear itself apart, chasing shadows while the answers lay hidden, brazenly, in plain sight. Rebecca wasn't merely lost, she was taken, and her captor, filled with a grotesque pride, wanted credit for his macabre masterpiece. He wanted us to know he had won. Such arrogance, such profound cruelty, is not born overnight. It is carefully cultivated, nurtured in the dark corners of a twisted mind. And the man responsible had been tending this poisonous garden for years, his true nature concealed beneath the disarming smile of someone you'd entrust with your very life. Let us journey back to the beginning. March 2011. Rebecca Hale was, in the parlance of her peers, a weekend warrior. Her weekdays were the structured rhythm of a paralegal in Salt Lake City, her small apartment a testament to meticulous order. But her soul found its true rhythm only in the wild. Her singular, consuming passion was hiking, not the gentle amble of a nature walk, but the uncompromising multi-day treks that could claim a life with a single misstep. Her friends often thought her mad. Her sister, Maria, pleaded with her to join a group, to seek company in the wilderness. But Rebecca craved solitude. It was, she often said, the only time the ceaseless hum of her mind went quiet, the only moment she felt truly herself. So, when Rebecca informed Maria of her planned 4-day solo expedition through Devil's Ridge, Maria was not surprised. Worried, yes, but not surprised. They shared coffee the morning before Rebecca departed. Maria still vividly recalls the faded university sweatshirt, the hiking boots so worn they resembled comfortable slippers. She remembers Rebecca's infectious laugh, probably at some silly joke Maria had told, a feeble attempt to quell her own rising anxiety. And then those final words, as Rebecca walked out the door. "If I'm not back by Monday night, send the cute ranger to find me." It was meant to be light-hearted, a playful jest. It became a prophecy. Monday dawned, bled into dusk, and passed without Rebecca. Maria's call to the ranger station on Tuesday morning was a tightrope walk, every word an effort to mask the burgeoning panic in her voice. They advised patience. Experienced hikers, they explained, often extended their journeys,
losing track of time in nature's embrace. But by Wednesday, when Rebecca remained unheard from, her emergency radio silent, the calm evaporated. The search was launched. What they discovered at her last known campsite sent a lead ranger's stomach plummeting. Her tent, partially collapsed by the wind, stood as a lonely sentinel. Inside, her sleeping bag lay half-spilled, as if she'd scrambled out in haste. 10 feet away, her pack had disgorged its contents. Protein bars, a first aid kit, spare socks, scattered across the dust. But what was missing? Her water bottles, her knife, and her radio, the very one she'd used 2 days prior to check in with the ranger station. Her voice, calm and clear, recounting, "Day 2, weather's holding, making good time." 6 hours later, a second transmission, a ghostly whisper against a backdrop of static. "Someone's following me." That was it. 4 words that would torment Maria for 5 long years. 4 words that ignited one of the largest search operations in Utah's history. Dogs were brought in, their keen noses sweeping the arid air. Helicopters crisscrossed the sky, their rotors a constant thrumming prayer. Volunteer teams meticulously combed every inch of those treacherous canyons. They found boot prints leading away from her campsite, undeniably Rebecca's size, pushing deeper into the red rock labyrinth. Then, abruptly, the prints ceased. Not faded by the wind, not lost on rocky ground. They simply stopped, as if Rebecca had evaporated into thin air. The search continued for 3 grueling weeks before scaling back. After 2 months, it transitioned from a rescue operation to a recovery operation. By summer, it had officially become a cold case. The grim presumption was that Rebecca had suffered a fall, perhaps into one of the many hidden crevices, or had succumbed to disorientation and exposure. Tragic, yes, but not uncommon. The wilderness claims lives every year.
Maria, however, refused to accept it. Rebecca's apartment remained untouched, a shrine to absence. Maria paid the rent for 8 months until her savings ran dry. She printed flyers, a desperate plea plastered in every hiking store, every ranger station within a 200-mile radius. Every single week she called Detective Cassidy Vega, the weary-sounding woman assigned to the case. "Anything new?" she'd ask, her voice thin with a hope that refused to die. "No, Maria, I'm sorry." Week after week, the same hollow answer. The case went cold, in every sense of the word. But here's the thing about cold cases, the detail that gnaws at detectives like Cassidy, stealing their sleep. There's always something that doesn't quite fit, a discordant note in the silent symphony of facts. For Cassidy, it was Rebecca's radio message, "Someone's following me." Not, "I think someone's following me." Not, "I heard something." A definitive, present tense. Someone was actively tracking Rebecca Hale through those canyons, and she knew it. The terrifying question was why, and the even more chilling query, the one that made Cassidy's skin crawl whenever her thoughts strayed there, what happened after that message abruptly cut out? 5 years is an eternity to cling to hope. Long enough for Maria to finally begin boxing up Rebecca's untouched belongings. Long enough for Cassidy Vega to move on to other cases, other missing persons, other families waiting by silent phones. Long enough for Devil's Ridge Trail to reclaim its mantle as just another beautiful, dangerous place where hikers tested their mettle against nature's indifference. Long enough for almost everyone to forget Rebecca Hale. Almost everyone. April 2016. 2 college students from Arizona, Tyler Chin and his girlfriend Brooke, made a fateful decision. They went
off trail. A foolish choice, the very kind rangers warn against daily. But Tyler, eager to impress Brooke, yearned for some hidden, unknown spot, a secluded vista to photograph for his fledgling outdoor adventure blog, which boasted a meager 30 followers. They scrambled down a narrow ravine, navigating carefully over loose, treacherous rocks. Suddenly, Brooke froze. "You smell that?" Tyler chuckled, dismissing it as a dead animal, perhaps a coyote or a deer. But Brooke stood her ground, unmoving. The scent was wrong, too potent. And then she noticed something else. A flash of color that shouldn't be there. Faded fabric, wedged tightly between two colossal sandstone slabs, almost entirely concealed unless viewed from a very specific angle.
Tyler climbed closer, and then he saw it. A human hand, skeletal, still wearing a watch. He screamed. Brooke, her fingers trembling, dialed 911. Within 2 hours, the ravine swarmed with county sheriff deputies, forensic technicians, and one detective who had driven 90 minutes the moment she heard the location. Cassidy Vega. She stood at the ravine's edge, watching as the technicians meticulously extracted what remained of the body. She knew. Even before the ID was found, before the confirmation, she knew it was Rebecca. The clothing matched Maria's description, the watch was identical, and the location, just 3 miles from Rebecca's abandoned campsite, aligned perfectly with the direction those boot prints had been heading. But none of that was what made Cassidy's hands tremble as she pulled on latex gloves and descended for a closer look. It was the note, pinned directly to the tattered remains of Rebecca's jacket, right over her chest, secured by a rusted safety pin. The paper, fragile and faded, had endured 5 years of harsh desert elements, yet the words, scrawled in thick black marker, were still chillingly legible. "You stopped looking too soon." Cassidy read it 3 times, a hot wave of anger rising in her throat. This was not a victim's final message. This was a taunt. Whoever murdered Rebecca Hale had staged this, leaving her body in a location just difficult enough to find, that it would take years, yet not so thoroughly hidden that it would never surface. They wanted her found, eventually, on their own twisted timeline. This was a game, and the note was their victory lap, a cruel declaration to Cassidy and to everyone else that they had won. The medical examiner's initial assessment arrived within a week. Cause of death? Blunt force trauma to the head, severe enough to be instantly fatal. The angle of the injury suggested she'd been struck from behind. Not a fall. Not an accident. Murder. Premeditated. Calculated. The kind where the killer first earns trust, then betrays it in the most brutal way. The note was sent to the forensics lab. 5 years of exposure meant no usable fingerprints remained. But they found something else. Faint, deliberate markings along the edges. Coordinates. And symbols. Tiny, intricately drawn symbols that meant nothing to most, but everything to an expert eye. Cassidy brought in Dr. Raymond Cath, a retired anthropology professor who had consulted on cases involving ritualistic elements. He studied the symbols for perhaps 10 seconds before his face went pale. "These are trail markers," he explained. His voice hushed. "Old ones, used by wilderness guides in the 70s and 80s, before GPS. Each guide had their own system. This particular set, I've only seen it once before." He pulled out his phone, scrolled through files, and presented Cassidy with a photograph. A rustic wooden sign outside a remote cabin. Canyon Soul Expeditions, run by a man named Garrett Boone. The name meant nothing to Cassidy then. Not yet. But it would. She ran Garrett Boone through every database at her disposal. The initial portrait was that of an unremarkable man, 41 years old in 2011, an experienced wilderness guide, proprietor of a small but well-reviewed tour company specializing in multi-day canyon treks.
Glowing testimonials from clients. No criminal record, not even a speeding ticket. But as Cassidy dug deeper, cracks began to appear. Canyon Soul Expeditions had abruptly ceased operations in late 2011. No explanation, no forwarding address. Garrett Boone had simply vanished from the hiking community. His social media went dark. His business license expired. It was as if he, too, had evaporated. And the timing, March 2011, the very month Rebecca disappeared. Cassidy secured phone records, a 3-day ordeal requiring 2 court orders. Finally, she had them. Rebecca's cell records from the weeks leading up to her hike. And there it was. 6 calls to a number registered to Canyon Soul Expeditions. The last one made 2 days before she left for Devil's Ridge. Rebecca had contacted Garrett Boone. Cassidy's mind raced. Had Rebecca hired him as a guide? Was she taking lessons? She called Maria. Did Rebecca ever mention taking a class or hiring a guide before her solo hike? Maria paused, a memory stirring. Actually, yeah. She said she wanted to brush up on her navigation skills. Took a weekend course a few weeks before she left. I remember because she came back so excited. Said the instructor really understood her love for solitude. Do you remember his name? Cassidy pressed. No, Maria replied. But she showed me a photo. Nice-looking guy, big smile. She joked that if he wasn't her teacher, she might have asked him out. Ice slid down Cassidy's spine. She pulled up Garrett Boone's DMV photo and sent it to Maria. The response arrived in less than a minute. That's him. The next morning, Cassidy drove to the last known address for Canyon Soul Expeditions. It was a 40-minute journey into the kind of wilderness where GPS signals surrender. The cabin stood at the end of a dirt road, nestled against a sheer rock face, surrounded by gnarled juniper trees and an oppressive silence. It looked derelict, dark windows, a sagging porch, but when Cassidy tried the door, it swung open, unlocked. She radioed for backup, but she didn't wait. A primal instinct screamed that every minute mattered. The cabin's interior reeked of dust and forgotten time. Old furniture lay shrouded in white sheets, a wood stove cold for years. But the back room, the one with a heavy padlock on the outside that Cassidy had to cut through, that room told a different story. The walls were a mosaic of photographs, dozens, perhaps 100, all hikers, all women, young, middle-aged, fit, experienced. Each face was circled in red marker, and under each photo, a handwritten note. Too cautious. Gave up. Too easy. Boring. But one photo, displayed prominently in the center like a gruesome trophy, bore different words. Rebecca Hale, smiling in her hiking gear, mountains towering behind her, and underneath, in Garrett's distinctive hand, Lesson 1. Perfect.
Cassidy's stomach churned. This wasn't mere obsession. This was selection. Garrett had been evaluating women, testing them, and Rebecca had been chosen for something far more sinister than a lesson. Around the room, Cassidy discovered more journals, filled with meticulous notes, dates, times, observations about clients, their habits, their fears, their reactions under stress. One entry from February 2011 made Cassidy's hands tremble. Rebecca doesn't trust easily, but wants to mention she hikes alone because people disappoint her. Said the mountains are the only place she feels safe. Ironic. She has no idea that safety is just another illusion, and I can take it away whenever I choose. He had been planning it, studying her, and Rebecca, seeking solace, had walked directly into his trap, believing she had found someone who understood her passion. The coordinates from the note led Cassidy and a team of deputies deeper into Devil's Ridge, to a place most hikers would never find. An old ranger station, abandoned since the 90s, hidden within a canyon so narrow you'd miss it if you weren't looking. Inside, they found camping gear, supplies, a generator. Garrett had been living out here, perhaps not full-time, but regularly. And in a metal footlocker, they discovered recordings, dozens of cassette tapes, labeled with dates. Cassidy's hands trembled as she loaded the first one into an old player they'd found. Static. Then Garrett's voice, almost cheerful. March 19th, 2011. Day 1 of the Rebecca project. She doesn't know I'm following her. Stayed about a mile back all day. She's good, better than most. Efficient movements, minimal wasted energy, but she made one mistake. She trusts the trail. Thinks if she follows the markers, she'll be safe. Doesn't realize I placed new markers 2 days ago, ones that lead exactly where I want her to go. Cassidy's blood ran cold. He had sabotaged the trail, leading Rebecca away from safety, deeper into the maze, while she believed she was following legitimate markers. The second tape was worse. Day 2. She's starting to realize something's wrong. Radioed the ranger station. Said someone's following her. Smart girl, but not smart enough. She still doesn't understand that I'm not just following. I'm hurting. By tonight she'll be exactly where I need her. And then we'll see if all that confidence holds up when the mountain she loves so much becomes her prison. Cassidy stopped the tape. She couldn't listen anymore. Not yet. But she had to know. She fast-forwarded to the last recording, dated March 21st, 2011. Garrett's voice had changed. Excited, almost giddy. She fought. God, she actually fought. I didn't expect that. Most of them freeze. But Rebecca, she tried to run, even grabbed a rock, swung at me, caught my shoulder. It's gonna bruise. I'll wear it like a badge. But here's the thing she didn't understand. You can't outrun someone who knows every inch of this canyon, someone who's been preparing for this for months. He dropped his voice, a chilling intimacy. I cornered her at the ravine edge, and I asked her, "Do you understand now? Do you see that all your skills, all your preparation meant nothing? That I was always in control?" She spat at me, called me a coward. So I showed her what happens to people who don't learn their lessons. The tape went silent, save for the wind and the sound of Garrett's ragged breathing. Then I left her where no one would think to look. But I left a note too, because eventually someone will find her. Maybe a year, maybe 10. And when they do, I want them to know. I want them to understand that every day they searched in the wrong places, every press conference, every tearful interview with her sister, I was watching, laughing, because you all stopped looking too soon, just like the note says. The tape clicked to an end.
Cassidy sat in that abandoned ranger station, surrounded by deputies whose faces mirrored her own sickness. And she made a silent promise. Garrett Boone would not win. He thought he was untouchable, believed he had vanished so completely he'd escaped justice. But he had made one critical mistake. He had kept trophies, meticulously documented everything, and now Cassidy held it all. Within the hour, she issued a warrant for Garrett's arrest. His photo, now devoid of any charm, flashed across every law enforcement agency in the western United States. The FBI became involved. This was no longer just a single murder. The journals hinted at other potential victims, women who had taken his courses and subsequently disappeared on solo hikes over the years. Different states, different jurisdictions, but the same chilling pattern. The media exploded. Rebecca's story was everywhere. Her photo, the haunting note, and Garrett's face plastered across every news channel emblazoned with the words, "Armed and dangerous." Maria saw the news at work and collapsed in her chair. 5 years of agonizing unknowing, and now this. Now she knew her sister had died terrified, betrayed by someone she had trusted. But she also knew something else, something that mattered more than anything else. Rebecca had fought. She had refused to give Garrett the satisfaction of her fear. That meant everything. The manhunt for Garrett Boone became one of the most intense searches in recent memory. Tips flooded in from across the country, sightings in Nevada, Colorado, even a fervent report from someone who swore they saw him at a gas station in Oregon. But every lead led nowhere.
Garrett knew how to disappear. He had spent decades honing his wilderness survival skills, how to move through terrain without leaving a trace, how to become invisible. These were the same skills he'd used to stalk Rebecca. Now he used them to evade justice. Cassidy worked 18-hour days, coordinating with federal agents, interviewing every person who had ever taken one of Garrett's courses. Slowly, painstakingly, she pieced together a profile of a man who had concealed his true nature behind a facade of rugged charm and outdoor expertise. Former clients described him as intense but knowledgeable. A few mentioned his strong opinions about weakness, about how modern people had grown soft and needed to be, quote, tested by nature. One woman, Angela Torres, recounted something that made the hairs on Cassidy's neck stand up. She had taken a 3-day course with Garrett in 2009. On the last day, they had become separated from the group during a navigation exercise. Angela said Garrett had appeared out of nowhere, startling her. He told me I'd failed the test, that if this had been a real survival situation, I'd be dead. He wasn't being instructive. He was angry, like I'd personally offended him by getting lost. She recalled him just walking away, leaving her to find her own way back to camp, a 4-hour ordeal. When she reported it to the tour company he was contracted with, they dismissed it, claiming tough love was part of his teaching style. Angela's voice cracked with raw emotion. When I saw Rebecca's story, I realized he hadn't been teaching me. He'd been deciding if I was worth hunting.
Cassidy documented everything, building a chilling timeline. She discovered something that deepened the case's darkness. Over a 7-year period, 5 women who had taken courses or hired Garrett as a guide had later vanished during solo hikes. 5 different states, different years, spread out enough that no one had connected them. But now, with Garrett's journals and the emerging pattern, it was impossible to ignore. He hadn't just killed Rebecca. She was his masterpiece, perhaps the one he documented so carefully, but she was not his first. The FBI opened investigations into each disappearance, and Cassidy kept hunting. 3 weeks into the manhunt, they caught a break. A park ranger in southern Utah reported finding an abandoned campsite. Fresh supplies, a sleeping bag still laid out, and most importantly, a driver's license. Not Garrett's. The license belonged to a woman named Claire, reported missing 2 weeks earlier after a solo camping trip. Cassidy's heart sank. He was doing it again. Right now. While they were chasing ghosts, Garrett had found another victim. The search for Claire became desperate. Every available resource poured into the area. Helicopters, search dogs, volunteer teams. This time they had an advantage. They knew Garrett's patterns, understood how his mind worked. Cassidy studied the terrain, compared it to where he'd taken Rebecca, and made an educated guess. There was a canyon system about 6 miles northeast of where Claire's car had been found. Remote, difficult to access, the kind of place Garrett loved. She led a small team in on foot, moving quietly, hoping to surprise him if he was there. They hiked for 3 hours. The sun was beginning to set when they heard it. Voices. Cassidy signaled for silence. They crept closer, using the canyon walls for cover. And there, in a small clearing beside a dried creek bed, they saw him. Garrett Boone, looking exactly like his photos, weathered and rugged. He was crouched beside a fire, talking to someone. A woman sat across from him, her hands zip-tied in front of her, terror etched across her face. Claire. She was alive. Cassidy's training kicked in. She radioed for backup, then positioned her team. They had to move carefully. Garrett was unpredictable, dangerous, and Claire was too close to him. But they had no choice. Waiting meant risking Claire's life. Cassidy stepped out from behind the rocks, weapon drawn. "Garrett Boone, police, put your hands where I can see them." For a moment, everything froze. Garrett looked up, and he smiled. Not the reaction Cassidy expected. He stood slowly, his hands rising, but that chilling smile never left his face. "Detective Vega, I was wondering when you'd figure it out. On your knees, now."
Garrett complied, still smiling. You know what's funny? I almost made it easy for you. Almost left the coordinates somewhere more obvious. But where's the fun in that? The chase is the whole point. Cassidy moved closer, her team flanking. One of the deputies cut Claire's zip ties and pulled her to safety. She was sobbing, shaking, but alive. You're done, Garrett. He laughed, a genuine, unsettling laugh. Am I? You think finding me is winning. Rebecca's still dead. So are the others. And I got years of watching all of you stumbling around in the dark, pretending you were close. Do you know how many times I was within a mile of a search team? How many press conferences I watched, seeing her sister beg for answers I could have given any time I wanted? Rage boiled up inside Cassidy, but she kept her voice steady. You're going to prison for the rest of your life. Maybe, but I'll be famous. People will study me, write books about me. I'll be remembered. Rebecca? She's just another victim, another cautionary tale about women hiking alone.
That was it. The spark that ignited Cassidy. She closed the distance, got right in his face. You're wrong. Rebecca fought you. She saw exactly what you were, and she fought. And because of her, because of what you did to her, we found your journals, your recordings, every sick thought you ever had. And now we're going to find every victim, give every family answers. Your legacy isn't going to be fear. It's going to be failure. You lost. For the first time, Garrett's smile faltered, just for a second, but Cassidy saw it. She had gotten to him. Backup arrived within 20 minutes. Garrett was arrested, read his rights, and taken into custody. Claire was airlifted to a hospital, traumatized but physically unharmed. She had been missing for 16 days. Garrett had been toying with her, moving her from location to location, playing his twisted game. But this time, he didn't get to finish. The news spread fast. Garrett Boone captured, another victim saved, and the investigation into his other crimes just beginning. Maria heard the news and collapsed in her kitchen, sobbing. Not from sadness, but from a profound, overwhelming relief. It was over. The man who killed her sister was in custody. It wouldn't bring Rebecca back. Nothing ever would. But it meant something. It meant he couldn't hurt anyone else. Garrett Boone's trial began 8 months later. The prosecution had built an airtight case. The journals, the recordings, the physical evidence from Rebecca's body, the note, testimony from Claire, who had survived to tell her harrowing story, and forensic evidence linking Garrett to at least 3 of the other missing women. He sat in that courtroom every day, looking bored, as if the entire proceeding was beneath him. His defense attorney attempted to argue diminished capacity, childhood trauma, anything to avoid a death penalty verdict. But the jury saw through it. They heard Garrett's voice on those tapes, calm and calculating. They saw the photos on his wall, the cold evaluation of human beings like they were prey animals. On the 6th day of deliberation, they returned with a verdict. Guilty on all counts. First-degree murder for Rebecca Hale, kidnapping and attempted murder for Claire. And as the investigation continued, additional charges for 2 other victims whose remains had been found using information from Garrett's journals. The judge showed no mercy during sentencing. Life without parole, multiple consecutive sentences. Garrett would never see freedom again. He would spend the rest of his days in a concrete cell, his wilderness skills useless, his control stripped away.
When given a chance to speak, Garrett stood and looked directly at Maria, who had attended every day of the trial. "You want to know what Rebecca's last words were?" Maria's lawyer tried to intervene, but Maria held up her hand. She wanted to hear it, needed to. Garrett's smile was ugly, triumphant. She said, "You're nothing." Even with her blood on my hands, even knowing she was about to die, she looked at me and said, I was nothing. Thought that would hurt me. But here's the truth. I proved her wrong. I'm the one people will remember, not her. The courtroom erupted. The judge slammed her gavel. But Maria was smiling through her tears, because she understood what Garrett didn't. Rebecca had been right. He was nothing. A coward who could only feel powerful by hurting people who trusted him. And history would remember him exactly that way. Not as some criminal mastermind, but as a pathetic, insecure man who needed to murder innocent women to feel important. After the sentencing, Cassidy met Maria outside the courthouse. They didn't say much, didn't need to. 5 years of searching, 5 years of wondering, and finally, closure. Not the kind anyone wants, but closure nonetheless. She fought him, Cassidy said quietly. The evidence showed she fought hard. He outweighed her by 70 pounds, and she still managed to hurt him. Your sister was brave until the very end. Maria nodded, wiping her eyes. She would have hated being called a victim. She'd want people to know she didn't go quietly. Then that's what will make sure they know. The case officially closed 3 weeks later. The FBI continued investigating other potential victims, but Garrett stopped cooperating. He'd gotten his moment in court, and now he had nothing left to say. He sits in prison today, in a cell with no windows, no view of the mountains he once used as his hunting ground. Reports from the prison say he doesn't interact with other inmates, doesn't participate in programs, just sits and stares at walls. The wilderness guide, who thought he was superior to everyone, reduced to counting hours in a box. Meanwhile, Rebecca's story lived on in a different way. Maria started a foundation in her sister's name, focused on wilderness safety and supporting families of missing persons. She worked with hiking organizations to improve trail marker systems and emergency communication protocols. She turned her grief into purpose. And every year, on the anniversary of Rebecca's disappearance, Maria hikes a portion of Devil's Ridge Trail, not the part where Rebecca died, but a different section, one with clear trails and beautiful views. She goes with a group now, other families who have lost loved ones to violence. They hike together, remember together, and they make sure that people like Rebecca aren't reduced to cautionary tales or statistics. They were human beings, daughters, sisters, friends. They had dreams and fears and favorite songs and inside jokes. They mattered beyond how they died.
The note Garrett pinned to Rebecca's chest, that taunting message about stopping the search too soon, is kept in evidence. Cassidy requested it never be destroyed, not as a trophy for Garrett, but as a reminder that evil relies on people giving up, on investigations going cold, on families losing hope. And that persistence, even when it takes 5 years, even when it seems impossible, can still win. Claire, the woman Cassidy saved, testified at victim impact hearings. She spoke about the 16 days she spent as Garrett's captive, the mind games, the terror, but also about the moment she saw Cassidy step out from behind those rocks, the moment she realized she was going to survive. She said something during her testimony that resonated with everyone in that courtroom. Garrett told me that I was weak, that I'd failed some test he'd created in his head. But sitting here now, watching him in chains, I realized he was the one who failed. He failed to break me, failed to make me believe his lies, and failed to understand that strength isn't about dominating others. It's about surviving people like him and choosing to keep living anyway. She rebuilt her life, went back to school, became an advocate for violent crime survivors, turning the worst experience of her life into fuel for helping others. Garrett had wanted to destroy her. Instead, he created someone who would spend the rest of her life undoing the damage people like him cause. That's the real ending to this story. Not Garrett sitting in prison, but the people who survived him, who refused to let him win, who took the worst moments of their lives and forged something meaningful from the wreckage. Rebecca didn't get that chance. She didn't get to survive, or rebuild, or fight back in any way, except those final moments when she told her killer exactly what he was: nothing. But her death wasn't meaningless. It exposed a predator, saved future victims, and created a community of people committed to making sure others didn't suffer the same fate. The mountains don't care who you are. They're still dangerous, still beautiful, still indifferent to human suffering. But the people who hike them, who love them, who understand both their majesty and their menace, they care. They look out for each other now. They report suspicious behavior. They take the threat seriously. And when someone goes missing, they don't stop looking. Not after 3 weeks, not after 5 years. They keep searching until they find answers. Because that's what Garrett Boone counted on. People giving up, getting tired, moving on. And the greatest victory against someone like him is proving that we won't, that every victim matters, that every family deserves truth, that justice might be slow, but it's relentless.
Cassidy Vega retired from the police force 2 years ago. She consults on cold cases now, helps other departments with missing persons investigations. She keeps a photo on her desk, Rebecca Hale, smiling in her hiking gear, a reminder of why the work matters. Maria visits Rebecca's grave every month. She brings flowers, talks to her sister like she's still there, tells her about the foundation, about the lives they've helped, about how Rebecca's fight, even in her final moments, inspired so many others to keep fighting too. And somewhere, in a maximum security prison, Garrett Boone sits alone with the knowledge that everything he did to feel powerful, to feel significant, backfired completely. He's not feared, he's pitied, not respected, despised. Not remembered as some twisted genius, but just another coward with a body count. Rebecca won, not by surviving, but by being exactly who she was until the very end. Strong, defiant, unbreakable in the ways that actually matter. Her last words to Garrett, calling him nothing, they were the truth. And truth has a way of echoing long after lies fade away. Rebecca Hale went into those mountains looking for peace. She found a monster instead. But that monster is caged now, powerless, forgotten, except as a warning. And Rebecca? She's remembered as a fighter. The sister, the woman who loved the wilderness and refused to let even death steal her dignity. That's how this story ends. Not with Garrett's note, but with Rebecca's truth. You're nothing. And he was. He is. He always will be. While she, and every victim like her, will always be everything he could never destroy. Their strength, their memory, their refusal to be erased. That's the legacy. That's what survives, and that's what wins.